I do think California said, for all the people that said the Democratic Party is crazy far left, crazy far left, crazy far left, what yesterday showed was, no, not really. If the Democrats were smart, they said, yeah, this is who we are. We're more closer to the center of the country. The center of our party is more closer to the center of the country.
While the full impact of yesterday's primary results is still being determined, we might be witnessing a slight trend away from polarization. Can you believe that? In not one, but both parties. On the Democratic side, the New York Times describes the California results this way. The choices seem to signal a shift to the center, likely to reverberate through Democratic politics across the nation. As for the GOP side, where five congressmen who voted for a January 6th commission appeared to have survived their primaries. Politico points out, quote, for the most part, Republicans who crossed Trump were not suffering for their infidelity. With us tonight, two of our favorite MSNBC contributors, Maria Teresa Kumar, the president and CEO of Voto Latino, and Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee and former lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland. Maria, you heard Matthew Dowd. Is the Democratic Party more center than people realize, or more center than than Republicans would want you to realize?
Well, I think it's the latter. I think that they're more centered. What we saw in San Francisco last night was incompetence unfolding and Democrats saying, we want competence. It wasn't because he was promoting bail bonds. I mean, bail bond reform, because that happened in Houston to great welcome. It was more that he wasn't able to fix what people wanted. And that is this idea of feeling secure when you go outside, not to be mugged, to clean up the city. And it was those basic things that wasn't happening in San Francisco that the voters got fed up. This was also, remember, a recall election where the Board of Education was not meeting the moment that people wanted their kids in schools, and instead they were talking about something completely off the books. And so it's this understanding that the majority of Americans are reasonable. They want a functioning government that they feel safe in, that their kids are back in school in, and at the same time looking at ways to explore creatively solutions that address fundamental broken pieces of our government. But it's not either or. And what we saw in San Francisco was someone was either we do this or this. And he's like, no, we need you to do, at minimum, keep us safe.
Yeah, but that's San Francisco. You can talk about incompetence. What about L.A.? Karen Bass is highly competent, and Rick Caruso is the guy there.
Yeah, but I think the same thing is like if anything, there was the head as a law enforcement in LA had couple of missteps, and they're still saying, no, we want you to continue this modernization. And it wasn't that Karen Bass is not coming in as a close second. It's more of a realignment. And I encourage people to look at what we're seeing, not just in California, but we're seeing in Houston. We have Lina Hidalgo, who is incredibly progressive, but has kept the city of Houston safe, and she's going to go on into a re-election. So it's a matter of, again, being competent and being able to demonstrate receipts. And Karen has been able to demonstrate receipts in the House of Representatives, and now it's a testament of, is she going to be able to do that in LA? I don't see a contest, because again, the person running there, yes, he was a former Republican, but he's independently minded and is going on as a Democrat.
Mr. Steele, what do you think?
Well, I appreciate the very fine analysis from my friend, but I think it does speak to a
very fine analysis. But I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah, I'm about to blow that ish up.
No, you're not.
Because the reality of it is,
I'm just going to laugh at the clock, Michael. I'm going to laugh.
I love Maria, but the reality of it is, you've got, I look to California and I look at LA and I look at San Francisco, and what I see is a state that recognizes, citizens recognizing that when you're looking at issues around crime and economics and things like that, they want people who can get things done. They're looking for a more grounded approach in dealing with the police. The narrative, I think there's still a little bit of that narrative lingering out there with defund the police and things like that. That sort of, while not preeminent, still kind of rattles a lot of the electorate. And so what you see is a nation that I think, is, again, I've been saying this forever, it's a center-right nation, and my center-left friends would disagree with that. But what it means is there is a center space, right? that the American voter is looking for in these elections. And when they don't see it, they don't hear it, and especially if they don't feel it. If they don't feel that, to Maria's point, that you're dealing with crime, you're dealing with the concerns we have in our community, they're going to make that change. And I'm not going to build too much into that and say, all right, well, there's this national shift all of a sudden. But I think there's some lessons that can be learned by Democrats there and Republicans about the kind of candidate that the voters are going to be looking forward to or looking for in these upcoming elections, which will make the general, Stephanie, really, really interesting when you're looking at someone like a Karen Bass and Caruso in California, because that will give you a better sense of the final direction people really want to go into. Not that Karen Bass is some flaming progressive liberal person, but it'll be interesting to see how she counter narratives a little bit off of Caruso's law and order kind of approach. I give you New York. We just saw this narrative play out in New York.
Right. Okay. She did say we shouldn't defund the police. She said that we actually had to meet the moment and address the issues that the police department were having in a way that addressed safety and modernization. And I think that speaks to understanding the fundamental issue that if you are in LA or sadly San Francisco, that you are not feeling safe and that you have to address those. And that is responsible politicians and being a responsible public servant.
Michael, look a little further ahead for me. Ron DeSantis over the weekend in a conservative straw poll beat out Trump. But Ron DeSantis, that's just another version of Trump. The same thing that you're talking about, Democrats, could they see forward to have a more centrist candidate? What about Republicans? Do you see a lane for this Liz Cheney type character forging ahead? I mean, you had 5 Republican congressmen who supported a January 6th committee. They survived last night. Trump don't like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually very telling in some very interesting ways. So I've said for a while, there's always been a lane for the Liz Cheney, Larry Hogan type of Republicanism. The question is, how do they then begin to navigate it? How do they set it in motion? And I think what we're seeing from some of these primary results is the beginning of the cobblestones on that pathway, right? So when you're looking at someone like DeSantis, who is just a dressier, a more suave and debonair version of the Trump man, right? He's going to be able to go out there and try to play that lane that's going to keep that Trump voter in play. But the problem is, still remains for someone like him, is Donald Trump, because he's hitched so much to Trump. And while he tries to do that Heisman with Trump, unlike these other candidates, he's not going to find that necessarily to his benefit. It creates an opportunity for the Liz Cheneys to play off of him and to play against him, because he's already been out here now trying to distance Trump. And when Trump gets mad at him, and Trump is not feeling him right now because he's been saying all this stuff about Trump, he's beating him in these straw polls. There's a point where there's going to be an accounting by Trump. And when Trump decides that he's had enough of DeSantis, that's when that race gets very, very interesting, because who's going to be the fallback?
Well, we'll see. Trump had enough of Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger. And you know what they both have right now? Jobs. He doesn't. Maria Teresa Kamara, Michael Steele, thank you both for joining tonight. I love seeing you both.